Hello there. Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, whatever time it happens to be where you are, my friends. It is indeed another beautiful day that the Lord has made. We should rejoice and be glad in it. Here in the CSRA, it has been cloudy and overcast all day. And you know, that's kind of like life. Sometimes the rain comes down on us. Our life seems to be cloudy and overcast with storms and clouds. But we know that the ON is still shining in our lives. And so we know that the sun is shining somewhere, the SON. And for that reason, brothers and sisters, we ought to be able to give God praise for yet another day and thank him because we're still here. Well, with that being said, I am Reverend M, pastor of Historic Hosanna Missionary Baptist Church, aka HHMBC. Go ahead and share with somebody, call somebody, tag somebody, ping somebody, let them know that we are on the air now and ready to continue this series on Christianity, a hijacked religion. I was told last night when I came on that somebody would ask, why is he hollering? And so I hope that the audio is okay for you now. And if I get too loud, somebody put it in the comments loud. So if there's anybody joining me right now, go ahead and put that you can hear me. For those of you who are on YouTube, we know we got started. Well, you were there with me, fiddling around, getting everything up for a little while. And so we want to say thank you. And off the official video, we'll probably end up editing that out. We want to say thank you, though, just for hanging around. And so let me see if I see anybody on yet. We don't. So what we'll do, we'll continue on. Let's go ahead and get started with prayer. Father, we bless you, we praise you, and we thank you. It is indeed another beautiful day that you have made. We are rejoicing and we are glad in it. We ask you, God, to continue to have mercy on those that are in the hospitals fighting with COVID-19, the others that are fighting with all of the other diseases and conditions that we deal with in this natural body that somehow have seemed to take a back seat to COVID-19, but yet are very real for the person that's experienced it and for the families that are supporting. We pray for those families, God, that are yet in the grieving period, especially for those, God, that are grieving 2, 3, or 4 loved ones or family members, for it is such a burden. And so we pray, God, that they can understand and know how to take their burdens to you and leave them there. And now, God, we ask that you bless all the listeners now in the future at whatever time they may watch this particular series. God, that you would open our spiritual eyes so we might see in the spiritual realm, our spiritual ears, that we might hear what you're saying to us individually as well as collectively. In the name of the Yahweh, Yeshua, Jesus Christ, we pray and we thank you. Now allow the words of my mouth, the meditation of my heart to be acceptable in thy sight. You are indeed my strength and my redeemer. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, so for those of you that are tuning in, as I was getting things together, give me just a moment. I forgot to do my shares. So give me just a moment to go and do the shares, and then we will get right in to the lesson. Now, let me know if you hear me okay. We did some adjustments on last night to the audio, and so we're trying to get it perfected. So let me know if you're hearing me okay for your audio. All right, so and if not, then we can work on it some more tonight after we finish the Bible study. So give me just a moment. All right, Newsom is good. All right. Sister Newsom, you and Sister Francine and my wife have been made hosts, and so you can make comments to those people who join in as part of HHMBC. I meant to send a text message to you, but I didn't. I've been working and studying all day, so see some kind of special something on your page, that's what I did. All right. So give me just a moment. All right, almost there. All right, what I'm going to do is so that we can, you're not just sitting there. I'll go and share it later because it's actually coming up different for some reason. So let's go ahead and get started. All right, let's go ahead and get started. It's good to see all of you there. Again, we're continuing our series on Christianity, a hijacked religion. And we're looking at, again, uh, not bashing Christianity, but we are looking at indeed the history of Christianity and how it has evolved from the time of Yahweh, Yeshua, Jesus the Christ, all the way up to our present day, which at that point we'll look at the various different denominations and how it's changed. But we haven't gotten to that point yet. But we are looking at now where Catholicism has 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 been interrupted with the Reformation, and again we've already studied how the scholars and the seminaries attribute to Martin Luther the act to be the organizer. I'm sorry, to be the organizer of the Reformation, when we know that actually it was John Wycliffe, maybe 100 years prior to Martin Luther in 1516, that actually started the, the process of the Reformation. And there were others who had no notoriety, just as there are those today that will work behind the scenes for a movement. And then when that movement takes off, they really receive no credit for it. So Martin Luther just happens to be the person who receives the credit for it, but indeed he was not the only one who was responsible and a key person or key figure in the Reformation of the Catholic Church. And from that, we have our Protestantism, which was the protest against the iron hand of the Vatican, the iron hand of the Catholic Church. And so from that, we begin to get the splits into denominations. And we'll start to look at that a little deeper later on. But let's go ahead and before we start to teach, let's go ahead and, I got my slides in backwards. So let's go ahead and get this disclaimer in. We'll get this disclaimer in. This is Bible study may not be for everybody. So if you're not willing to read for yourself, research for yourself, reason for yourself, process for yourself, and ultimately take responsibility for your own Christian growth, this just may not be the Bible study for you, and that's okay. But if indeed you are willing to read for yourself, research for yourself, reason for yourself, process information you're going to receive for yourself, and know that it is your responsibility for your own spiritual growth, stick around. You just might learn something that will help you grow on this path of your purpose journey as you are a follower of the way or you identify as a Christian. All right, now I'll go back. What I want to do is what I want to do is we're going to look, and I hope you don't mind. Somebody out, don't get upset. Don't leave. All right, can I turn it up a little bit? Yes, I can. Sister Newsom, I can turn it up a little bit. Let's see. Okay, how about that? Is that better, Sister Newsom? Let me know if that's better. I got it turned up a little. We'll see if that works. But I normally present these studies in where I do basically like a lesson plan and a school format so that you have your slides and that's outlined. And I just didn't have time to get all of that in. I put the time in the study, but I didn't have time to do that. So we're just going to go directly to the website, or we're going to actually go to YouTube, and we're going to look at, find some information about this man named Max Weber. Max Weber. Now, let me explain something. If you have never been to Germany or to Europe, specifically in Germany, the W is pronounced with a V. And so in America, you're familiar, maybe, or should be familiar with the car called a Volkswagen. But what happened is Volkswagen in Germany actually starts with a W, but for Americans, because we know how we pronounce it, we put a V in front of it instead of a W. And so I'm not mispronouncing the name, and I don't want you to get sidetracked with that and says, why is he pronouncing it Weber? And it clearly says Weber. Well, in German, his name is pronounced Weber. So if you want to call him a Weber, you can, but his name is Max Weber. And we're going to look at who he is and why he's important and what role he plays in Christianity. All right, we're going to look at what role he plays in this thing that we call Christianity, which ultimately helped and shaped what we know and what we believe to be Christianity today. A lot of our doctrines, a lot of our theological ideology, it comes from Europe. In fact, I'm not rambling, but I just want to take us back. If we go back to your history, back to the times of Columbus supposedly accidentally finding the Americas, when the indigenous Americans were already here. There were some melanated people that had already come to what we call North America when Columbus arrived there. And so the systems that they had in place that were working during that time frame are not the systems that we have been taught, because we've been taught what the Europeans came and conquered the land, took over the land, and we have been our ideology has come out of what they have taught and the systems that they have created. Now, oftentimes we don't think about that because we're born and life is what life is, and we just take what we have been taught in the circles that we're in to be the way things are. And really, if we never get outside of our own environment, then we're not exposed to how things happen in other places. And so with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and bring this up. And there's one slide I really wanted to show you, but I don't know if I actually put it up. I looked at it while I was studying, and it was to show you where, and I'll try to remember. Somebody sent me a text message to bring the slide up that shows how many people embrace capitalism. Somebody sent me a slide, an email or text message to make sure next week I bring the slide that shows you when we look at a worldview, what parts or what population actually embrace capitalism, which is something that we're going to get into. And so I'm on Wikipedia, so I'm not taking credit for what I'm showing you in this video. This is coming from Wikipedia, what you see on the slide. So you can go to Wikipedia and put in Marx Weber, and you can find out for yourself. But before I go to the video, let's look at very quickly, I'm just going to look at the very first paragraph, and then we're going to look at a quick video on YouTube. It's about 7 minutes long. What we're going to do so that you can prepare for it. We're going to play portions of it. We're going to stop and discuss it. Then we'll continue on. We'll stop and discuss the concepts that the presenter is bringing up. And again, I didn't create the content. It'll be on YouTube, and so you can find it there. But we will stop and discuss the concept. So with that being said, we're already 15 minutes into the Bible study. And so I just wanted to set the table for it. So Maximilian Karl Emil Weber, all right, a German sociologist. While he didn't consider himself to be a sociologist, but he is, according to our experts for America, is considered to be one of the fathers of sociology. He considered himself to be a historian. That's what he called himself, a historian. All right, a jurist and political economist who is regarded among the most important theorists on the development of modern Western society. We live in the modern Western society. Okay, so what that indicates is it's more than what we actually see on the paper, my friends, enemies, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. It validates what I've already said, which is our ideologies, our theology, our sociology has been brought to us from Europe. All right. And so when I use the term Eurocentric theology, it's not a bash, it's not a throw off. It's to identify that the majority of our theology here in the United States of America, throughout the majority of our denominations, has its roots from Europe. And from Europe, it goes back to Africa. But that part which was established in Africa, again, what was established in Matthew chapter 5 through 7, and I'm going to bring that up every night. I'm going to bring that up every Bible study. I'm going to bring it up almost every time that we preach until we start to reprogram or rewire our brains to know what we need to be looking at so that we can be better followers of the way, that we can be better Christians. And so, again, he is considered to be a very important person as it relates to the development of the modern Western society. His ideas were profoundly influenced social theory and social research, despite being recognized as one of the fathers, I already said it, of sociology, with Karl Marx, August Comte, and Emil Durkheim. Weber never saw himself as a sociologist, but as a historian. All right, so just so that we introduced of who he is, now let's take a moment and we're going to look at this very creative video that is only 10 minutes and 16 seconds. So you know already, you can prepare your mind. It's only 10 minutes and 16 seconds. We may finish it and we may not, because again, brothers and sisters, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, enemies and friends, what we're going to do is we're going to play a portion of it. We're going to stop and process what has been said. All right, here we go. All right, Sister Newsom, is it any better? All right, she gave me the thumbs up. Oh, Janice said it's still too low. Janice, can you turn your volume up some? Because what I really don't want to do is, like I said when I first started, and I'll cut it up a little bit here and see if that helps. I don't want it to get All right, we'll see if that helps. Somebody let me know if it's better right there. We'll work on it until we get it tweaked out. But I'm conscious, and one of the remarks I go on. I do come on every Sunday night, and I do a watch party, and I stay on with the watch party for if you don't know that. And one of the comments that were made is, "Why was I hollering?" I responded, I was excited, but. Anyway, we're working on the volume so that it's comfortable for everybody. So we have to find a happy medium. It may not be perfect for you because I know some people are auditory and some people ears. I mean, you may be hard of hearing, and so you need it a little bit louder. But then there's some people who have sensitive ears, and you want it a little lower. And so let's consider everybody, but try to come to a happy medium. So I hope that we're good right there. But what I want to do is go ahead now and start the video. Okay, hold on. I'm not getting. All right, let's see.
Take a second and imagine life just over 500 years ago. Say you're in Europe at the tail end of the Middle Ages. If you had to name the biggest change between then and now, what would you choose? Maybe the internet or industrialization or the incredible advances in health and medicine? Maybe you'd think back to Marx or Durkheim and say that it was the shift from feudalism to capitalism.
Let me know if you're able to hear from the video.
The most important change wasn't technical or economic or political. The biggest change, he said, the one that best distinguishes the modern world from the traditional one, was a difference in the way we think.
If you're able to hear the video, okay, put good in the comments.
Like most of the theorists we've studied so far, Max Weber lived at the end of the 19th century, and the turbulent changes of that time influenced him as it did all the others. He lived during the formation of the first German national state, and watching this process firsthand made him concerned with understanding modern society. So in his work, Weber examined some of the defining characteristics of the modern world, which sociologists have now spent over 100 years studying and arguing about. He focused on ideas like rationalization, bureaucracy, and social stratification, and when he saw where modernity was heading, he was really worried. But to understand what he was so worried about, you need to understand how he got to modernity in the first place. And for Weber, the real defining features of the transition from traditionalism and modernity were ways of thinking, not modes of production or social integration, but ideas. To think traditionally is to take the basic setup of the world as given. In other words, traditionalism sees the world as having a basic order, and that order is the way things ought to be. You can see this very clearly in feudalism and divine right monarchy. The monarch is understood as having been anointed by God. You owe them your allegiance regardless of whether they're good or bad at their job. The question of whether or not they deserve the position never even comes up. But if traditionalism takes things for granted, modernity doesn't. In modernity, everything is up for grabs. What Weber saw when he looked at history was that societies and people were becoming more rational. They were undergoing a process of rationalization. And Weber's definition of rationality included three specific things: calculability, methodical behavior, and reflexivity. Calculability means that if we know the inputs, we can know the outputs. Just think of a bowl made in a factory versus one you make yourself. Every single bowl comes out of the factory exactly the same, whereas no two bowls you make by hand are going to quite match. Now, the reason that we know the outputs if we know the inputs is because there's methodical behavior involved, a procedure to follow. In the factory, the method is in the machine. So the results are going to be the same no matter who's pulling the levers. Finally, thinking rationally for Weber meant thinking about what you're doing. In other words, thinking reflexively. You're constantly looking for new ways to improve the process, for new and better and more efficient ways to make bowls. So traditional society is the society of individual artisans, each with their own process, which is how it's always been done. But modern society is the society of explicit instructions and standardized methodical procedures.
Okay, I want to pause right there when she talked about the artisans, and just to kind of get us, for those of you that are visual, to put a picture in your mind. We're gonna get to the point of capitalism, and since she's talking about artisans now, when we go back to the biblical days of Ben Yahweh Yeshua, Jesus the Christ, that many of the people were artisans. Some had trades, such as the fishermen. Paul was a tent maker. Ben Yahweh Yeshua Jesus the Christ was a carpenter, and so there was a form of capitalism in Africa. that was not a part or is not the same as the capitalism that we know today in Americas and in Europe, but there it was similar. So what it shows is, again, if we go back to the origin, back in Africa, there was a model that was modified by the Europeans. All right, it was modified by the Europeans, and then the Europeans dominated the model that they took, and that's the model that they brought to the Americas. We don't often think about that, again, because if we get busy with a 9 to 5, we learn systems. She talked about that. So we learn systems. For those of you that may be in my generation, the system was go to college, get an education so that you can get a good job, retire, get a pension, and live a good life. That's the system that we focused on. And so we didn't look back at the entire history of where did that system come from? Where did that ideology come from to do that? Now in the 21st century, it's really not the same model. Today, it's not. And if we're still propagating that model to our children, then we are propagating the wrong model, because the model today is not go to college, get a good education, get a career, retire, get a pension, because many of the corporations now have moved or shifted to a new model, and there's not many of jobs that you're going to be able to fulfill that pattern of being hired and stay on for long enough to get a retirement. And so you're going to find yourself now moving from job to job, and you're going to have to set up your own retirement. All right. And then there's some other things, but let's get back to what she's saying, because we want to, again, keep this kind of focused on how it relates to us as followers of Ben Yahweh, Yeshua, Jesus Christ, and to the evolution of Christianity. But I just wanted to throw that in as she talked about artisans so that we can relate it back to the Bible. All right. Because I'm not going to pull the Bible out tonight. What we will reference issues that are in the Bible. So for those of you that may get upset that I'm not going to pull the Bible out tonight for Bible study, I'm telling you, okay, already, I'm not pulling the Bible out for Bible study, but I will make references when it's appropriate. All right,
which are always being reflected on and improved. So what caused this massive shift in how people think? What kicked off this process of rationalization? Faber gave here what might seem like an unlikely answer: religion. In his book, The Protestant Ethic and the Spirit of Capitalism, Faber argued that the transition from traditionalism to modernity began with the Protestant Reformation. For hundreds of years, the Catholic Church dominated medieval Europe until, in 1517, a German priest named Martin Luther denounced corruption in the church. This set off a series of new religious movements that radically opposed Catholic dogma. This was the Protestant Reformation. And it's in these new movements that Faber saw the origin of modern rationality. Catholicism, after all, was the basis for the traditional worldview. Everything in medieval life, from the structure of the social order to the way you farmed, was the way it was because God willed it. By contrast, in Lutheranism, you still have a divinely sanctioned place in the world, but for the first time, the question of how well you are performing your role became important. This idea of personal responsibility opened the way for another important figure in Faber's view of history: John Calvin. Calvin didn't believe that God could possibly be concerned with anything that one measly little human might do. Instead, Calvin believed in predestination. The idea that your fate, whether you're saved or damned, has already been set by God from the beginning of the universe. And there's
all right, I want to pause right there for a moment, because she dropped a lot right there that we need to go through. She's already brought us through Catholicism up to 1516 with the Reformation with Martin Luther, and of course, again, I'm throwing in there John Wycliffe, who preceded Martin Luther, but she threw a new name in there for some of us, and that was Calvin and Calvinism. And so she brought up the point that his theory and what he taught was predestination. And so when we look at how European theology has shaped our denominations and our thought patterns, when we think about predestination, sometimes we get it from the point of God's already determined what we're going to do on my path, and I just need to find out what that is and follow it. But that's not exactly what Calvin meant by his predestination. Really, what he was talking about is that either God has chosen you to go to heaven or God has chosen you to go to hell. And no matter what you do in life, that you're already predestined for that. Now, hold on. I want you to get this. All right. She talked about the ideology of working. All right. So if you are a good worker, those who were predestined to be saved would be identified because they worked, and their motivation for working was to be the best worker they could be for God, because He already predestined them to go to heaven. And so that ideology kind of falls into that. Now I'm working for my salvation, but I have maybe an arrogancy because now I'm in that chosen group, and those who aren't in that chosen group, they're just not going to make it no matter what they do. Now, we don't have time. I'm not going to go into a whole history of Calvinism. If you want to know more, you can study it. And I would suggest, if you have time during this COVID-19, that you start to spend some time, maybe an hour a day, in researching and studying some of these people and their thoughts and how they affected for those of us at HHMBC as missionary Baptists, so that we know how those pre-thoughts came into our denomination. And if you're not Baptist, then you can study to see how they came into your denomination. All right, let's go ahead and move on.
There's nothing you can do to change it. You're either one of the elect or you're not. So how do you know? Through what Calvinists called a proof of election. And here's where personal responsibility really comes in. The proof that you were saved was to be found in how you lived your life. So the point of your life was no longer that it was divinely appointed. It became a matter of how well or how much you work. And by extension of this logic, success itself became proof of election. If you're financially successful, then that was a sign that you were blessed by God. Suddenly, you didn't just work until your needs were met as you did traditionally.
Okay, and I hope that this style of teaching is not irritating to some of you. If it is, please just stick around. But I want to pull out points, because what she said there, what we're going to end up getting into is looking at where did the prosperity ministry start at? Where did that ideology come from? And so this is indeed the genesis. This didn't start in the United States of America. This ideology of the prosperity ministry started with Calvin. All right. It started with Calvin. It didn't start with people that look like me. It started with Calvin. This ideology started with Calvin. So I want us to understand what shaped it, and then how it evolved, and how it came into a lot of our communities, and how and why it became popular. This is still a very popular ideology. It's a very it's still widely taught and bought into, and regardless to what tag they put on the denomination now, this originated with Calvin. So what our instructor here has told us is that if you were in the elect, the way that people knew that you were in the elect was because you were financially successful. You worked hard. You got a benefit from your working hard. And so then you were considered to be in the elect. If you were poor and a beggar and you didn't work hard, you were a slacker, then you were considered to be predestined to be poor, but you were not saved, and so you were not going to go to heaven. All right. If any questions, or put them in the comments, and make some comments. Let me know what you think. If you knew this information, put yes. If you're learning, put learning. But I need you to interact with me. All right. We've got about 30 minutes left, and I don't want it just to be me talking and our virtual instructor off of YouTube From the crash course psychology number 9 talking. I want to get some feedback from you. This is Bible study, and we talk back in Bible study. So if you knew this information already, put yes. If you didn't know this information, put no. If you're learning something, put learning. All right? Go ahead and put those in the comments, and we're going to go back to let her continue on till we get to some other concepts.
Society. Now, the work was an end in itself, and you worked to accumulate as much wealth as possible because wealth proved you were saved. This is the sociological consequence of the Protestant Reformation that Weber studied and understood. It transformed a communal, traditional society into an individualistic, capitalist society, one that was focused on economic success. And I don't know if you've noticed, but modern capitalism is nothing if not rational. Think about it. You must work methodically in your calling. You must be constantly reflecting on your work in order to work more efficiently and productively. And you use profit as a calculable measure of your success. So rationalization gets its start in religion around questions of how to work. But Weber spent his career showing how all of society came to be organized rational. In fact, if you've ever been to the DMV, you've seen what Weber argued was one of the biggest impacts of rationalization in society: the rise of bureaucracy. Bureaucracy is a key part of the transition from the traditional to the modern state. Weber identified 6 traits that make it both extremely rational and very efficient. It's composed of a hierarchy of positions with an extremely clear chain of command. This hierarchy is made up of many very specialized roles and is held together by formal written communication. The people in the bureaucracy accomplish their work with technical competence according to detailed rules and regulations, and they do it without regard to the particular people they're serving. In other words, they do it impersonally. And I can't think of a better example of all these traits than the bureaucracy you see at the DMV. The workers do their jobs competently and according to the rules, and they treat you just like they would treat anyone else without regard for your personal characteristics. That is, impersonal. But there isn't only this change in the way the state works. There's also a change in the way the state is obeyed. In a traditional society, Weber believed that the state ruled through traditional legitimacy. People followed the king because that's how it had always been done. But the modern state works differently. It rules through a combination of what we call legal rational and charismatic legitimacy. Legal rational legitimacy is essentially a belief in the system itself. You follow the rules because they are the rules. So the DMV employee doesn't ask for a certain piece of paperwork because that's how it's always been done. He does it because that's how the procedure instructs him to do it. If the manual were rewritten tomorrow, he'd do it that way instead. But there's a problem with legal rational and with bureaucracy in general. If it's all about following the rules, well, somebody needs to make the rules. That's where charismatic legitimacy comes in. You follow the commands of a charismatic leader because of the extraordinary characteristics of that person. So the modern state is an apparatus of rules which are ultimately directed by a group of charismatic leaders. In the US, for instance, when we go to the polls every 4 years, we're making a choice about who is going to direct the bureaucracy, and we make that choice based on the characteristics of the people running. And here's another one of Weber's major contributions to sociology: the idea that the people who run to be leaders of our bureaucracies do so with the support of political parties. For Weber, political parties were a key example of social stratification, or the way that people in society are divided according to the power they hold. Weber didn't think that society was divided purely based on economic classes or your relationship to the means of production, like Marx did. He argued that the system was more complicated and consisted of 3 elements. Like Marx, he included class, but he didn't think that classes had unifying interests. Weber also included political parties, defined broadly as groups that seek social power. And finally, he included status groups, defined by social honor, which includes things like respect and prestige. All 3 of these things, class, power, and status, affected a person's place in society. More importantly, each of these elements of social stratification could vary independently. So there could be...
All right, we're going to pause for a moment. Class, power, and status. Class, power, and status, all right, which you should be seeing on your screen. Class, power, and status. If you remember, brothers and sisters, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, enemies and friends, we looked at in the African society, in the African society with the African Hebrew Israelites, in the biblical times, that even before we moved to Europe with it, that basically we saw the same type of system. You had the Romans, who were Europeans, the Roman emperor, who they were in rule, and so they were at the top of the class. Then you had the Pharisees and the religious leaders who had both religious and political power. All right. And then you had the class up under that. So again, the system wasn't developed by the Europeans. The system was modified by the Europeans. So let's move ahead, and I'm seeing if, all right. All right, I got a yes, so it means you're sounding better. And Sister Francine, let me know if you can understand the video better. I cut the volume up on it. I'm experimenting with it now till we can get it right.
Be a poor priest, say, who is high in social prestige but of a low class, or a lottery winner who is of a high class but low in status, or a bureaucrat in a political party who has some measure of political power but not necessarily money or status. And then there are those who can turn their fame or status into political power. Unlike Marx, Weber didn't take a particularly critical stand on stratification in society, but that doesn't mean he didn't see its problems. For Weber, rationalization was the defining feature of the modern age, and he was deeply worried about it. Remember, rationalization is about three things: calculability, methodical behavior, and reflexivity. But it's really easy to lose reflexivity, to stop reflecting on your work or your role, and instead become locked in a calculated routine that becomes meaningless and unthinking. Weber worried that the systems that rationalization built will leave behind the ideas that built them, and that they'll simply roll on forever, meaninglessly under their own momentum. He worried that we'll become locked in what he called an iron cage of bureaucratic capitalism from which we can't escape. Our lives will become nothing but a series of interactions based on rationalized rules with no personal meaning behind them. This worry about meaning and the concern for ideas and how they shape our reality is one of the big influences that they were handed down to future sociologists. On the micro level, these ideas were picked up by what's known as the symbolic interactionist paradigm and theorists like Irving Goffman. Meanwhile, theorists like Talcott Parsons and Jürgen Habermas took on the more macro version of these questions, looking at processes like rationalization and bureaucratization and culture more generally. We'll talk more about culture and what it is next time. But for now, you learned about Max Weber and his understanding of the modern world. We talked about rationalization and the transition from traditional to modern society. We discussed bureaucracy, legitimacy, and social stratification in the modern state, and we saw why Weber was so worried about the modern world. Crash Course Sociology is filmed in the Dr. Cheryl C. Kinney studio in Missoula, Montana, and it's made with the help of all of these nice people. Our animation team is Thought Cafe, and Crash Course is made with Adobe Creative Cloud. If you'd like to keep Crash Course free for everyone forever, you can support the series at Patreon, a crowdfunding platform that allows you to support the content you love. Speaking of Patreon, we'd like to thank all of our patrons in general, and we'd like to specifically thank our Headmaster of Learning, David Sachevsky. Thank you for your support.
Okay. So what we're going to do, we actually are going to look at a couple of more videos, not tonight though, from the crash course. And you can, if you have some time, you can go on YouTube and you can look at those as well. But so that we won't go into it cold next week, we're going to be looking at some other concepts from Max Weber, I'm sorry, which is feudalism and capitalism. We're going to look at feudalism and capitalism. All right. And so when we look at feudalism, if you look at the slide that you see on there, are you able to read the slide? Are you able to read the slide? I'll wait, find out if you can read the slide. Somebody let me know. Someone let me know if you can read the slide. All right, wonderful. Thank you, Sister Christina. There's a large delay in your responses, and so I didn't want to go ahead if you couldn't read the slide. All right, so okay, Sister Newsom says a little bit. All right, if you're looking at it on a phone, it might be rough. You may need to look at it on a tablet or on a computer. I know that it shows up different on each, but I have it as large as I can get it for right now. All right, and so as we look at the top, and now we're looking at what is called feudalism, all right, or the feudal system. All right, feudalism, or the feudal, which is feudal system. And I didn't have a slide to be able to put all of this on, so I have a brief outline that you're not going to be able to see. All right. Now, so both of those two systems are the same. They come out of Europe, and this was the predecessor to capitalism, which we now have in the United States of America. And next week, I'll give you the map to give you an idea of the popularity of capitalism. It may surprise you. So I'm not going to tell you what's going to be on it until you see it. But if we look at it again, this is something that Marx Weber, he used as he came up with his ideologies of socialism, which is very important. And it's very important, but it's an area that we don't pay much attention to. We just do it. We don't think about how we're socialized. We just call it, I'm just living. I'm living a rough life, I'm living a hard life, or I'm living my best life. But the ideologies and the circles that we're in, the people who influence us, all of that, the traditions of our families, the traditions of our culture, all of that plays into how you're socialized, which shapes how we think. And how we think, whether we believe it or not, shapes how we worship and what we think about worship and what we think about God. Again, church, it's religion and the Bible are a lot more complicated than we have taken it to be. And the reason from that we've learned. Matter of fact, let me ask from the audience. Let's see what you got from what we've come up to so far. All right. So why do you believe? I'm shaping in the form that you can't give a wrong answer. So why do you believe that we were taught to just let somebody else make the decisions for us, rather than to go through the stress and the process and the detail, have to figure it out for ourselves? Why do you think that we've been taught basically from the Catholic Church in the hijacking of Christianity, from processing information for ourselves to just taking directions from those who are put in charge? Go ahead and put that in. All right. I see what you said there, Sister Newsom. I have to do the same thing with my phone now, because I'm not going to sit in the optometrist chair until I feel safe. And I really do need new glasses. So I have to get the magnifying glass out as well. I got a great big one, Sister Newsom, that can sit on the table. I can put a whole book up under. So I understand it. So I asked that question, and while you're putting your answers in, let's go back. And so we're looking at the hierarchy of the system that was in place before capitalism. And so the system that we live under now is called capitalism. The system before that, we're looking at a pyramid of how it was set up. Now, you see it's in a pyramid because everything goes up. And somebody tell me, how many folks are at the top? Somebody put in the comments, how many folks are at the top? All right, I'm waiting on your comments. I need your interaction tonight. All right. Somebody said the answer to the question. All right, Sister Newsom, she got it. Y'all, come on now. Y'all watching it. Those that you can see it, it's only on the pyramids. There we go. There's one person at the top in this feudalism system. All right. And answer and Sister Newsom, I might get something for you because you're the only one answering the questions right now. I need some of the rest of you to answer some of the questions. And she said, because the leaders are supposed to know everything to lead us. And that's what we've been taught, all right, to depend on the leaders. The leader has proven himself to be a good leader. We depend on them, and they give us all the information that we know. Well, that was put into place so that you don't know the information. The only information that we would know would be what the leader tells us. If the leader doesn't give us all of the information, then we won't have it, and we develop a socialization, or we develop a system, we develop a mentality, we develop an ideology that says that, hey, I trust this leader, so they're going to give me the right stuff, and if I follow them, I'm going to be okay. Well, that's not what Ben Yahweh Yeshua, Jesus of Christ, did. That's not how he taught, all right? That's not even what the Apostle Paul taught. Paul told Timothy to study. He told them, study so that you show people that that you know the word for yourself. We've already talked about it at HHMBC. We should know what the definition of a disciple is. We should know that the Hebrew word for it is Talmud, and that for many, the group like Ben Yahweh had would have been called Talmudim, all right? And we know that the ideology or the definition of it from Hebrew is more than just to be a student, is more than just to study, but it is a innate desire to imitate and be what the teacher or the rabbi is. That's much deeper. And so that requires a whole different ideology, it requires a whole different mindset, and it requires a lot more work, because now I'm required, the teacher puts an expectation on the student to do the work. Otherwise, the student will be put off and won't be a student anymore. If the student doesn't do the work, then the rabbi or the teacher dismisses them from being a student. Well, in the hijacking, that's changed. We're going to make it easy for you. You just do what we tell you. We're going to give you all the information that we think that you need to have, and the rest of it we're going to keep to ourselves. And so what happens is that we fail to grow. And that's why, brothers and sisters, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, enemies and friends, that across the United States of America, whether it is through the Catholic Church or through the Protestant Church, that over 80% of church members are biblically illiterate. And that's a terrible thing. So if our leaders were doing such a good job, then why are the people so ignorant to the book that has the foundation of what we say that we are? Somebody tell me if that makes sense. Somebody let me know. Does that even make sense? Somebody said it's easier to hold others responsible, less stress, and go by what something else says than to hold them accountable. Absolutely, Christine. That is what it is. And so even with us and those of you that are on from HHMBC, this is a stretching, because you haven't had to do this. You weren't taught to do this. And it's like, dang, Wives Rev even bring that up. That's not important. But it is important. And I'm teaching you how to learn and develop and research for yourself, because if I get off track, and I've gone back and listened to some of my videos, and in my head I said one thing, but what came out of my mouth was something else. But if you're not studying for yourself, if you're not researching for yourself, then you won't pick up that mistake that I picked up when I go back. As a matter of fact, on yesterday's sermon, I missaid something. All right, when I went and listened to it last night, I said something that was different than what I had in my brain. Okay, but if you don't ever go back and look at it, then you don't even know what it was. You missed it, and so now you took whatever I said to be the gospel, which it was an error, and that's why we need to study for ourselves. Let me see somebody put another one. It's way easier, no worries. It is, but because and Sister Francine said it's easier, it's no worries. It's no worries because we don't know what God really requires out of us. Okay? We don't know what God really requires out of us. Now, are we saved by works? Let's take a moment, and I'm gonna get through this. This will be, well, we won't even get to capitalism until next week. All right? But we're just not gonna move to move so that we can say that we have Bible studies. No sense in moving if we haven't digested the material that we have. All right? And so when we only take what people tell us and not look at what Jesus did, we know that in the Bible that we're not saved by our works. We're saved by the work of Ben Yahweh, Yeshua, Jesus the Christ. All right? We're saved by his work. So if we know the Bible for ourselves, then we'll know that Calvin was wrong on we're saved by our works. We're not saved by our works. The Bible doesn't say that we're saved by our works. We know that in the Bible there, Paul asked the question about, are we saved by our works? We're saved by the work that Ben Yahweh, Yeshua, Jesus the Christ performed on the cross, because no man could pay the penalty for sin. All right? No animal could pay the penalty for sin. There had to be the shedding of innocent, perfect blood for the remission of sin. And that's what Ben Yahweh, Yeshua, Jesus the Christ, that he did. So now let's move from once we get saved, then we are required to work. Ben Yahweh lets us know that once we get saved, we're required to work, not to work for our salvation, but to work because we receive salvation. Okay? But when we get to the Catholic Church just says, all right, follow this list of things. As a matter of fact, they stopped until last year. They stopped the process of going to God for forgiveness, because you go to the priest and you make a confession, and then the priest can forgive you for your whatever it is, or tell you to go do something else and then come back, say so many Hail Marys or whatever process that they give you. And now they slowly took Jesus out of the picture. And so they completely depended on the priest, or they depended on the clergy. And now the clergy not only have power, they have influence, and then they get rich. Okay, why? Because you're happy to pay them to take the worries and the responsibilities off of you. You know, I'm actually into some things that I'm doing, and if you can pay somebody to do something that you don't like, and you have the funds and the means to do it, you pay them because you don't like it. Well, we can't pay somebody to study for us. We can't pay somebody to, well, you can pay somebody to pray for you, but I don't know how much that's going to work. But why pay somebody to pray for you when you have the same access to the person that they're praying for? Somebody tell me, does that even make sense? I don't think that makes sense. But let's move on. I know I'm not going to get finished with it. Let me see if I see any other more comments, because I'll reply to your comments. And all right, so I do actually. I'm going to leave it right there. We may come back to that slide. I want to address something that Sister Newsom brought up. It says because the leaders are supposed to know everything to lead us, and I'm going to tell you, I don't know everything. I'm still learning, and the day that I stop learning, then I will stop being an effective teacher. I'm not even going to call myself a good teacher. I'll stop being an effective teacher if I stop learning. All right? And so all of us, we go through life, and life is a teacher. Life prepares us for the next realm of life everlasting. And so I'm no better than any of you. I'm no better than any other person who's in a congregation. All right? I'm no better. My purpose and my mission is to teach. All right? And then to teach you how to learn, so that if I fall or if I am in error, okay, if I'm misled and I bring what I was misled with to you, that you know how to go and research it for yourself. And so any leader who says that they know it all, I'm going to say it needs to go back to the drawing board. All right. So no, we're not supposed to know it all. We do need to know what we know, but we're learning too, and we make mistakes too. And so what happens then is that you don't put the leader on a pedestal. All right. You don't put the leader on a pedestal, because you recognize that while the calling for the leader is different than your calling, I can't do Sister Newsom's job. All right, I can't do the church clerk or the church secretary job. I'm just not good at that. I'm not going to be the one to be in the finance. While I know what a balance sheet is, I know what an earnings and loss statement is, I know what Quicken is, I know what a spreadsheet is. My mind is not wired to follow the routine and pay the meticulous attention to detail that it takes so that your balance sheets balance out. When you reconcile, all right, just like reconciling the checkbook, when you reconcile it, that it's going to come out to be zero. That everything that you put in, when you look at everything that you put out and you come up, you should balance out. That's not my calling. All right. Now, I know a little bit about it. I know how it's supposed to be done, but that's not my calling to do. I'm not a finisher. I've got many ideas. And so we have to know ourselves, brothers and sisters, ladies and gentlemen. We have to know, as we've been on this purpose series, we have to know what our purpose is. We have to know what our assignment is and what lane that assignment is in. And then we have to stay in our lane until God tells us to move to another lane. If he shifts us to another lane, then that's okay. But it's no sense in me going and trying to get in your lane because I'm not going to be effective in your lane. All right? I'm not going to be effective. And if you try to get in somebody else's lane, you're not going to be effective. And that's why it's important, as we said on yesterday, for us to know what our assignment is, to know what our purpose is. Well, we are just over an hour into the lesson, and I know we didn't get started exactly, but I'm trying to do better on the time. And we can come back and we can pick back up, but it will give you time to do some Googling, give you some time to look at YouTube and look up Max Weber, you may say Max Weber, and you heard me there. I said Max Weber because that's my brain saw the W. But you can look them up. So on next week when we come back, that you'll be familiar with the terms that we're going to be using and kind of the flow of it, and it'll make the Bible study go better because then you can participate better because you're already familiar with it. So if you will, ma'am, if you will, sir, go ahead and look up Max Weber, and that's MAXWEBER, Weber, kind of like, I think there's a barbecue grill called the Weber. All right. So if you look that up and get a little bit of information on who he was, look up capitalism and feudalism, and then you can actually participate with your knowledge on next week. Well, I love you. I love you. I love you. You can't change that. And we hope that you will share this information with somebody else and let them know that we don't have a traditional Bible study over here, but we are indeed learning the word, learning why we are who we are and why we serve the way that we serve. And we challenge you to utilize your critical thinking in all that we teach, because I need you to catch me. Somebody should have put in the comments yesterday, Rev, you said that wrong, and I would have got it, so I could have corrected so everybody here. Anyway, we love you. We want you to stay safe, stay vigilant. We want to see you on the other side of through. God bless. Have a wonderful evening.